The video that you are about to see is a reenactment of the Battle of Hastings. In the Battle of Hastings, King Harold is defeated by William the Conqueror about 7 miles out of the city. The Battle of Hastings was fought close to the current-day city of Battle in East Sussex. In the battle, William the Conqueror brought around 7,000 men and horses. Legend says that in the battle, King Harold himself was hit in the eye with an arrow and killed immediately. As you watch this video, please take note of all the kinds of technology, weapons, shields, and other tools of war he used. Throughout the video you just saw, many weapons and tools of war were used. Weapons such as the broadsword, spear, bow and arrow, war axe, and many more. This video will tell you who used these tools of war and how they used them. This video will not just be about the weapons, but also about the tools that were used in battle that would also help keep you alive. First, we will start with the weapon that all knights were trained to use, and is normally carried by nobles and squires. The longsword. The longsword was a double-edged blade that was around 3 feet in length. The longsword was an ideal weapon for knights because you could fight one-handed on horseback or two-handed on your feet. Although it would not go through plate armor, hitting somebody with a broadsword or a longsword would normally either render them unconscious or break a bone. The only disadvantage to using a longsword is you couldn't really reach out and touch somebody. And this fact brings us to our next weapon, the bow and arrow. This is a basic diagram of the bow. Using compression and tension, it would launch a projectile upfield. This is a picture of the arrowhead that was on the end of the shaft of the arrow that was launched downfield. concept of the bow was so simple that it was pinch, pull, release. The bow is still being used today in hunting and sports. What you see here is the predecessor of the bow, the crossbow, a more mechanicalized and more powerful short-range weapon that launched a projectile downfield. This is a projectile, a crossbow bolt, only used with two fins, was placed on the shaft of the crossbow and launched downrange. It was loaded like this. Your foot would go through the harness, and you'd pull the rope up and lock it position. You would then place the bolt inside there. You can see here in this picture that the ammunition of the bow, the arrow, is much longer than that of the crossbow. The crossbow also took a much longer time to load and was only accurate at a short range due to the lack of the third fin at the end of the bolt. It was also very difficult to load a crossbow on horseback, rather than loading a bow and arrow on horseback. Sometimes, a knight riding into battle would prefer to use a war axe instead of using his longsword right off the bat. This is because the war axe is capable of knocking his opponents straight to the ground or even cutting their heads off. It also pierced through plate armor and chainmail. This weapon, the lance, was used by those on the front lines riding on the back of a horse. You would put this weapon underneath your arm and ride towards your enemy's front lines. This is a demonstration at a jousting competition of what a lance would normally look like during a charge, and how one would be used. This was a spear, sometimes a knight's primary weapon. It was used to reach over the shields of their enemy and stab them. Sometimes, though, the spear would get caught and you would not be able to get it back, so the knight would have to resort to his secondary weapon, his best trained weapon, the longsword. This was the spearhead. This is what was normally fixed to the end of the spear by using nails or rope, and would sometimes come off during a battle. No knight was perfect at fighting. Few could deflect an arrow or spear coming at them at 100 miles per hour. They needed defense on their side. So instead of having to take the hit, somebody decided to take something that would take the damage for them. Those not wealthy enough to afford plate and metal armor would normally purchase this, a leather tunic. Because it offered so little protection, it was normally worn by archers who never really had to do any actual fighting. They just shot, reloaded, and sometimes had to run. Plate armor was normally used by those fighting melee. It was heavy, hard to move in, but offered a great deal of protection. It would protect you from getting hit, stabbed, cut, or even shot by some arrows. But sometimes your armor wasn't your first line of defense. Your shield was. There were many kinds of shields: the scutum, buckler, kite, heater, and parma. Shields had all sorts of advantages and disadvantages. For example, the scutum could be used to form a shield wall, but could not be used on horseback. Although the buckler and the heater and the parma were all ideal for riding on horseback, but didn't offer much protection. Here are some examples of the shields I've just listed. The shield that you see here is known as the scutum. The scutum was good for shield walls and offered a great deal of protection, but it was very big and lumbersome and hard to carry for long distances. This shield is known as the buckler or the parma. Both the buckler and the parma look very similar. They have the same shape and design. The parma is just slightly bigger than the buckler. This shield, the kite, is a very expensive shield, not normally used in combat. Normally used in ceremonies and drill. Only extremely wealthy knights and nobles could own this shield. This shield, the heater, was an ideal shield for knights to use with one-handed combat. It was light and easy to sling off and switch to two-handed, but it was effective and didn't get you killed. It was also ideal for using on horseback. The ability to fight on a horse was an ideal skill for knights to learn because it gave them an distinct height advantage and advantage of speed. This is an example of a man on mounted combat. His sword is drawn, and he is able to swing down at his enemies rather than reach up and block. He can also trample his foes with his horse. But what would happen if your horse was killed out from under you? You'd be trapped. So eventually, a man came up with the idea of horse armor. Horse armor allowed full movement of the neck, legs, tail, and back. It would protect the horse from crossbow bolts, pikes, swords, lances, and many other dangers on the battlefield. This picture is a good example of a strong ideal warhorse, a courser. The courser was such an ideal warhorse because it was strong, fast, and had loads of stamina. Coursers are also known to be brave when charging into an enemy. This picture is an example of the horse Destrier. Destriers are short, fast, strong, and loyal. Destrier was famous for its shortness. When riding a Destrier in combat, you could easily get on and off in a moment's notice. Horses were very important in history. Throughout the Crusades, they were used in many battles, such as the Crusades themselves. The last true cavalry unit was used in World War I. Horses have changed the course of history. Without them, the world we know today would be completely different. And that's why I think horses are the most important tool of war of them all. This brings us to a close in my video. This has been Tools of Medieval Warfare. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.